Well, today's speaker, there he is over there, Gary Harwood and his wife Carol, who couldn't be with us today. Yes. They are fantastic museum supporters. But Gary's here not as a supporter exactly, he's here as an expert. He's known for his two beautiful narrative photography books, Tiger Legacy, Stories of Massillon Football, the one that's back there that you might win, and Growing Season, The Life of a Migrant Community. Tiger Legacy was selected as one of the 10 best photography books for the summer of 2016 by American Photo Magazine. That's a big deal. Growing Season won an award from the National Council for the Social Studies and the Ohioana Book Award from the Ohioana Library Association. His Tiger Legacy project resulted in 2 exhibitions a decade apart here at the museum. Gary taught visual storytelling and was the chief photographer at Kent State University. He won 4 National Circle of Excellence Awards from the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. I have to read these because there's so many wonderful honors with long names. He was named the 2001 University Photographers Association of America's Photographer of the Year, and he won the 2005 Ohio Understanding Award from the Ohio News Photographers Association. So he's not just in one area, it's all photography, but he's all over the place with it. He received the 2006 Individual Artist Grant for Photography and the 2005 Artists and Communities Grant, both from the Ohio Arts Council. Welcome our star for today, Gary Harwood.
Thank you, Margie. Today we're going to talk about how photographs tell stories. And so there's 2 parts to this, and then there's like this middle part that helps you to get a better understanding of how these photos are collected. But the first part is basically called single image communication, and the other is multi-image communication. These 2 in concert create long-term large projects. So I'm going to begin this with the podcast. So since this is fairly short, I urge you to go and check out the podcast. I'm pretty picky about how I'm interviewed. More often than not, it's not what I hope for, but the podcast is terrific. And pretty much all of my ideas are captured accurately and in great sequence. And so that's really an art into itself. I look at this as the 3rd part of the book, the exhibit, and now this podcast. So for those of you who want greater detail about what I'm talking about today, check it out. It's really, really good. So I want to talk about something everyone does. Takes pictures at home of things they like. Okay, this is in my backyard. Hummingbird on Monarda. What's making this photo work? How about light? And the background is blacked out. So it makes it easy for you to see the photograph, see what's in the foreground. So in essence, this is part of the language of photography: light, composition, all of the things that we learn very early on that it gets layered upon as you get into more complex photography. So these very basic things never leave you. So from the earliest days of photography, learning the basics of the language of communicating visually, these things will be the foundation for what you do later. Like this. Are you noticing how the power of the light in this photo is equal to the power of the light in this photo? So this photograph was taken at one of the games, and it had just stormed. So it was dark, it was gloomy, it was wet, and then all of a sudden the light came out, and the dark skies had still not left. So realize that I have maybe 30 seconds to get this picture before it gets cloudy again. And so these photos don't linger. They show up, they reveal themselves for a brief period of time, and all of this knowledge about the basics of photography and the content you're trying to capture come together at one moment in a very brief time. So I think I had 30 seconds to make this picture before it got cloudy again. Again, light, light. Natural graphics, the lines, shapes, and patterns that are in our world. Okay, this is another basic picture, right? From just me, driving around, getting things that I think are interesting for me. But look at how that matches perfectly with the lines, natural graphics here. So to make this photo, I have to stand on a bench with a wide-angle lens and shoot straight down, so the lines of that bench, of those benches, become one of the drivers of making this picture. You'll notice the player is off to the side a little bit, so you don't want to center your subjects, this kind of thing. But these images in concert, collected, when collected with lots of other ones, become really important to the storytelling. And by the way, every one of these Massillon images are stories unto themselves, and I could talk at length about each one of them because it's significant. These are lines that happen naturally. They're happening live. They're happening in front of you. The odds of me getting another picture like this where all the hands are perfectly in sync is almost zero. So you have to be aware that the possibilities for seeing lines and light and color are only here briefly and then gone. So while I was photographing the bus and all the players hanging out of the bus, I realized that the better picture was just a close-up of their hands reaching out to people who were alongside the bus, following it as it was, I believe, moving. I'm not sure. Foreground, background. Okay, you can't see this in here, but I was afraid this might happen, but there's pine branches all around this. So in essence, the eclipse was taken through pines. So the foreground are pine branches, the background is the eclipse, not unlike foreground, background in this. So this is school. This is how your photographs become better. And so as the things that I learned very early on lay the foundation for how I see, now I'm looking at capturing content. And so background is obviously the field, the foreground are the orange men in the window or inside of a booth reflected in a window watching the practice. There's a lot that I could say about how these pictures come to be, but a lot of it is just roaming and realizing, looking for light, color, shadows, mixing it with getting into places that have value, and then making pictures. Color. Okay, just a flower in the backyard, right? Color. But look at how color dominates this picture. And so this is another one that could not be replicated. This came from a tip from one of the assistant coaches. Oh, it was the equipment manager. And I met him at a meeting when they had all the primary football people together at some kind of reception. Don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember he and I talked, and he said, you should come to one of our practices in the field house. And I remember distinctly him saying, it starts at 4:30, and I said, well, I can certainly, get off work a little early and be there, at that time. He goes, no, I don't think you understand, 4:30 in the morning. And that's when I started, forgot where I am and the significance of football here. And so this happened right at sunrise as the practice was concluding. So they're coming off the field house, off the field, right when the sun is coming through those narrow windows, hitting the orange pads in the background. In the entire 5 years it took to make this project, I could not make this happen again. So again, you have 30 seconds, maybe. And of course, what is he carrying, right? Look at the graphic. Look at how visual that is. Okay, even more rare. And so these photos look simple. They look casual. They look easy. They're not. And that's part of what I wanted to share with you today is all the things you learn early on layer upon themselves until you reach a point where you see all this stuff naturally. It's just kind of, I don't even think about it. It's just part of, what I've grown to become as a photographer. So I'm centered on content and trying to get something that has value and meaning that we use in the actual project. Then it's about approach. How do we make these pictures? There's lots of different ways of collecting. Collecting for me is collecting images, collecting tips, collecting locations, events. So you're always making notes, you're always trying to expand the project. You're in a constant state of collecting. Collecting interviews, collecting. So turning that into assignments is one of the ways in which pictures are made. So this was a self-assignment of Junie Studer. Turned out to be one of the last opportunities to photograph him. And so he's holding up his son's jersey with light that's coming through I think his sports room was in the basement. So this is a basement window. And so I'm not setting up lights. It's not in a studio. It's just natural light coming through a window. And so very carefully had to use a very slow shutter speed because of low light, we were able to make this picture. It became very valuable to the project. These are self-assignments from notes, from talking to people. The other is just jumping in the car and cruising. Okay, I don't know what I'm going to find. More often than not, I find nothing. I lap Massillon, I lap the neighborhoods, I'm in and out of spaces, and most of the time I go home with nothing. But there are mornings, this was on Friday morning before the game, they were outside of a convenient mart. And, again, this doesn't look like, overly important picture, but it really is. This is them talking sports, they got their coffee, it's the morning of the game. Don't you feel it? I do. And the more of these simple, quiet pictures you make, the more the story of this place is more it comes together. If I'm too centered on the field and the players and the white hot center, as I like to call it, then we never really truly know the depth of what's out here and what needs to be captured. Then there are just surprises. This was me just coming home. And I'm like, oh my God. So I pulled over and there's the picture. This is not hard to make. There's no light changes. There's no anything that requires urgency. I just got out of the car and made a few frames. But I loved it. Loved the blue. I loved, the simple graphics, the open sign, the jersey sitting outside of it. Quiet, simple, perfect. Then there's discovery. Okay, things I didn't even know they're like realizations in front of me. So I went with the players to Cedar Point. The coach gave them, I guess, a day off, and they all got in buses and went to Cedar Point. And then I learned from a conversation that the players had left Cedar Point and went to the shoreline, Lake Erie. So a very cool picture unto itself, right? I like it. And then I was showing it to somebody, and they said, do you realize the first forward pass in football history was done there? And I'm like, what? And so you don't even realize what you have until somebody who knows things, shares it with you. According to what I was told, and I checked this and made sure, Newt Rockney and some other guy, first forward pass. And so this is the place where it happened. And here's our Massillon players. So discovery. Some of them are tips. So these are called internal influences. These are the people within your project, the people associated with the project, giving you a sense of what you're missing, giving you ideas. This is how you know you're in, by the way. When people are comfortable enough to start giving you ideas, that's when you're in the sweet spot. So I get a text, and I said, what's up? And so they said, well, I don't know if you know about this guy that does this crazy speech before the start of the game. This is like the night before, and so all the players come to his house, and he does this crazy speech. And so I went, and it was amazing, crazy, and it was great. And so this is in his backyard, and this was not my idea. This is not me cruising. This is somebody from the community, all of you guys. Somebody texted me and said, you should check this out. And so these are the different ways in which, we collect. So the other thing I'm looking for are details. nuanced pictures that I don't know what I may do with it at the time, but later they become very valuable. So they become segue photos that lead you out of one idea into another. So when the storytelling starts to come together, you don't have these choppy sections. So an idea maybe develops, and then you have this new idea forming within the scope of the project. Images like this and this tend to help you exit out of one idea into another. So now we're starting to merge out of single image communication into multi-image communication. So what are we capturing? Content. First part of this was about aesthetics, right? Light, lines, shadows, color. Now we're looking at content, the two halves that are needed for a photograph to stay. And so this one is cultural, right? Doesn't that illustrate culture? And so culture is one of them. Tradition. By the way, what is a key driver in this photo? Emotion, capture, getting in position. Doesn't foreground, background make a lot of sense in this picture? By the way, so much so, again, back to those original days when you're young and you're trying to figure out, I was talking about foreground, background and everything. I had to run ahead of the coach and the president and the boosters. So I had to outrun them and then turn around quickly and photograph what? What did I want in this picture? Why would I do that? Why would I run to get ahead of them and then turn around? I wanted that stadium in the background. I wanted that sold out stadium. I don't want the other side of the Massillon Stadium, which is much smaller, much less visual, right? So it requires me getting ahead of them, turning around, and then I got lucky, and both of their faces turned toward me when the photo was taken. So let's be honest, that's pretty fortunate. But realize that background was a plan. That was me turning around and making sure that sold out crowd was in the background. That is not an accident. And so foreground, background are happening here along with tradition, along with culture. Look at the background in this picture. History. So we go to interview one of the last remaining players, one of the last. There were still one or two others. From the 1940 Paul Brown Massillon team. And so we're interviewing him and talking to him, and he brought out all of his goodies, so they're all on the table, which I thought was cool. He was all prepared for us. And he opens up this tiny little book, and he's showing it to me, and I said, is this from Paul Brown? He goes, yes. Paul Brown did this. He goes, yes. And I was just like, oh. And so I just aimed him toward a window, because window light is wonderful, by the way. It's a soft, very soft light. It's almost like a softbox. And so you just get it so that, can you see how it goes from light to shadow? So it's not flat, it's not a direct light, it's a side light. Side light is way more interesting. And then, of course, there's the plays. Okay? Access is the most important part of storytelling. Period. End of discussion. That's the thing that drives great storytelling. If I'm on the periphery, I can't even begin to tell stories. I believe the very first day I was here, I said, I can't do this without access. At which point, the president of the boosters said, you got access. And so, but access is not just about to the fields and the locker rooms and the offices. Access is to people. And so this person, about half, this person was one of the players' moms. Okay, so she was a Tiger mom. And the significance of that was revealed to me when somebody mentioned to her, wow, he's a senior. This is your last afternoon as a Tiger mom, because it was the last home game. And it kind of, it hit her how important that was. And so I was able to make this picture. I want you to get a sense of what this was like for her. It took a long time to gain access to a person in a way where I could do this. I was that close to her while this was going on. What should she do if I'm doing this? What should she do? How about this? How about this? Turn away? Isn't that what normally that's what you do? But she didn't do that. She let me have all those pictures. And then afterwards, I said, do you understand why that was important? She goes, yes. Content. So, collecting. Over the course of time, we will have several hundred of these. From several hundred of these, what I call selects, the multi-image communication will edit down to maybe 125, from which we start looking at now how to structure it. There it is. That right there is the beginning of Tiger Legacy. In fact, that was the first night we laid it out. That became a notebook, several of them actually. And so this is now external influences, people outside of the project, people who have never seen it, people whose opinions I trust. When I was doing growing season, I actually reached out to somebody who doesn't like my work. But he's a really, really good photographer. And I'm not looking for someone to agree with me. I'm looking for somebody who is very good at what they do and starts to notice the strengths and the weaknesses in the project. And so these dots that you see are the beginnings of us figuring out what people liked. The more of these you see, the more likely it is we're keeping it. And so look at how many like this photo. Okay, so this is how you know it's resonating with an outside audience. And so light, shadows, graphics, all that early stuff leads to content, which leads to access, which leads to intimacy, which leads to powerful images. All of this is a process. And then the audience sees it, and look what happens. So once we're sure about what we have, we're still in that final stage of trying to figure out what, the completion of this. And so we have spreads, and then we have chapters, and we have sections within the chapters. This was the final spread of Tiger Legacy to be figured out. This is a picture by David Foster. We had taken this out, and he did not like that. I didn't like it. I liked the photo. But we had no place for it, because once we started to see the connectivity of the images, there just wasn't a place for it. But then we were reading the narrative of one of the stories about Engagement Day and how it began at a convenient mart, and there's your final spread. So this was the last picked piece of putting that project together. That was it. Off it goes. But the creating of the chapters, we go from spreads to chapters. I remember, we all know about this, everybody knows about this, way even outside of this area. The footballs in the bassinets, something I think Life magazine captured when, in the early 60s? Some crazy way back like that. So we know about this, but I started to make a, not requests, but just putting it out there that I would love to cover a Maslin funeral. If we're going to do the bassinets, I want to see the other end of it. And so I get another text. And this person says, do you still want to cover a funeral? And I said, sure. Give me more info and stuff. And so I get all dressed up. I have a tie on, the whole bit. And I get there, and everyone's in their Maslin colors. I was the only one there in a tie. And it turns out the person who passed away wanted at her funeral a pep rally. And so the Obi showed up, the marching band showed up, the players showed up, everybody was there. And I was talking to the daughter of the woman who had passed away, and she goes, I know you. And I said, you do? Yeah, you photographed my mom many times. I'm like, you're kidding. So I did not pick this photo. but I remember her. And she was the one by the locker room getting hugs from players as they went into the locker room. This photograph is not aesthetic enough to make the book on its own. It's just not, it's by itself, it's just not at the level I want it to be. But when you pair it with that, now we have it. And so this is her funeral. And so the marching band did the alma mater, and that's what you're looking at. So instead of photographing the band doing the alma mater, do we all know what that looks like? They're all playing their instruments, and it's cool, it's in a funeral home and all that. But isn't the better photo turning around and looking at the family while when the alma mater is playing? And so that's what this is. They saw all these pictures long before any of you did. So this was their contribution to the project, in their way. Fantastic ending to this beginning. And of course, there's all these other images that are in the middle of it. Speaking in the middle of it, external influences. So I'm talking to Dr. Jerry Lewis, who is a sports sociologist. He ended up doing the foreword in the book. But we were at Dunkin' Donuts having coffee, and he was looking at the pictures, and we were talking, just kind of picking his brain. And we were looking at all the photographs, and I showed him a series of pictures, and he goes, well, this isn't unique to Massillon. This happens everywhere, all over the place. Usually people say nothing. It's just them getting into their heads and getting ready. And then I realized that I could illustrate that by having no captions. And so if you read the very bottom of this, this is the text that accompanied the players surrounding Paul Brown's statue before they go into the locker room to get ready. And so Brody Ton talks about right after the prayer, people will disperse, find family members or close friends and hug them. You tell them you love them. They tell you good luck. After that, you head into the locker room, and it's all business. That moment of all business created silence. That's what it looked like, by the way. And so we did a series of pictures in the locker room that happen everywhere, where players aren't talking, or very little talking, and they're mostly in their heads getting ready, right? And then bang. The text is back, the player breaks through. This whole concept was from an external influence. And it's one of my most favorite discoveries post-photography, where you realize you have something that you didn't even know you had, and it was a tip from somebody who saw it clearly for the first time, who gave you the sense of its place in all these other images. And so I mirrored the going in with the coming out. And then, of course, the text about the mom talking about what it feels like to watch her son run out on the field. Okay, so these became the series of interviews from the moms. We did about 3 or 4 of them. My favorite by far is 7 Mothers. And then when we get to the end, it's about returning to the community, making sure we got it right. And so we went back to the people we interviewed and made sure that these stories were accurate to what they thought and what they hoped. I have a kind of philosophy that when people are not regular interviewees, like how many of you have ever been interviewed? See a few hands, which means your interview will be your first interview. You're a very different person from somebody who's a politician or somebody who's in a position based on their job who are interviewed all the time, which means they have no idea what's coming. They have no idea how to respond. And I'm looking for intimacy. I'm trying to get the questions to take them inward where they reveal things that are wonderful, deeply moving. So in many ways, this is a partnership. And so when the narratives were done, we brought them back to the people and said, is this what you meant? In fact, I remember saying those very words. Is this what you meant? And in all cases, it was yes. We had no changes. Nobody had a problem with any of them. In one of the stories, there was a man who whose dad knew Paul Brown very well. And Paul Brown used to come to his house to escape media and all kinds of other stuff. They used to sit and talk together. And he talks about the morning of his wife's funeral, how he left everybody and was just there. And the things they said were so deep, the things he said were so deeply moving. You know, I wanted to make sure, based on his memory and what I've got here, that it was right. And they loved it. They thought it was great. And so this transfer is really, 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 really important to me, because the people I'm interviewing are not professional interviewees. And so that was a big part of it. In many ways, if you think about how a photograph finds its way to you, it goes through a series of steps before you ever see it. And then, of course, there is the mock-up. You know, I'm almost there. The mock-up. This is checking the color, checking the quality. And then, of course, it becomes this. And this. And this. And so, you know, the audience is the last part of this, isn't it? And so, you know, I would love to do a third project. It's about the only thing I would really love to still do, but I can't find an idea, a topic, a subject that is worthy of 5 years of my time. It has to be a really great idea, right? It comes back to how powerful is the idea. Growing Season was obvious. Tiger Legacy was a little less obvious, but it became obvious very quickly. I needed a few weeks in your community before I realized, oh my God, this is like crazy cool. And then, you know, it was, you know, I knew there was so much here that I could do 5 years. Because it takes 5 years to do a project like this. Anything less, why 5 years? Why multiple years? First year, you're just getting to know the place. You're just getting to know the habits, the routines of things. When you get into the second and third year, it becomes more about recognizing what is commonplace versus what is special or what is different. I don't know the difference early on. So it takes a while. When you get into years 4 and 5, that's when intimacy and those personal pictures start coming to life. They have to see you a while. If you see me 10, 20, 30 times, and I've seen, you know, we have conversations and we talk, you won't be freaked out when I aim my camera at you at all. You'll understand exactly why. You'll understand that he must see something. When I was working with the migrant workers in Hartville, I saved photographing them in the rain until the very, very end, because I didn't want them to think I was taking advantage of them or showing them in a bad light. So I waited till toward the end, and then I came out. It was in a storm. They're all in they're literally in rain gear. And I came out, and they all started clapping. And I'm like, what? This is how it, you guys don't realize after the course of time, you know, that it's not like it was. It's very different. And so they're all clapping, and I'm like, what? And the one guy says, we were wondering when you'd finally show up in bad weather. You know, and so, you know, I was thinking one thing, they were thinking something else totally different. But they also understood why. And so, you know, that relationship, which we could form, allows me to get in deeper and deeper and deeper. And that depth is where the great storytelling is. So images, I think that was it. Oh yeah, and then this becomes our family. So it's the students, it's Dave Foster, it's all of the people we photographed and interviewed. You know, they're all, these are the people that made the book, basically. And so there it is. Does anybody have any questions? Kind of curious about images versus multiple images.
Here you had some what I would call perfect photographs, and I think you said you used maybe 125 in the book. Best guess, you took how many total?
30,000, 40,000, maybe. Something like that. But you have to understand, when you photograph, I'll give you another example. That's a good question. So let's say you're like my topic. Something about the way the light's hitting you, or you're a significant person in the story, whatever it could be. Okay, so I've got my first picture, but now I'm looking at the background. Here comes a few more. And so maybe I want to get you in there. Here comes a few more. So when you take 200 photographs on any assignment, or 300, it's thinking. It's my brain working. So, when writers write, they make all these notes, and they're not keeping all that. They're going to pull from it the stuff that is valuable or meant something. And so, but you don't want to be waiting for it. You have to be capturing, because it's there and gone too quick. And so you really want to be capturing while you're thinking, knowing that most of this is not going to, if I had time, I would show you one of them. I would take my entire shoot, one idea, and walk you through how I did what I did. But you'll see that in almost every frame, I'm moving, changing, up, down, left, right. Maybe I want, more people in the background. There's more here than there is here. See the empty seats? And so you don't know what the background's going to be, what the foreground's going to be. You might do something. You might jump up and go, Eureka, and, I have 5 seconds to get that, right? Right? Crazy woman jumps up and goes, Eureka, I've got it. Bang, bang, bang. That's the other thing. People don't realize that I get in position long before they react and do stuff. And so when they do you really think I can go from where Margie is to here and get that shot? I have to be here before they do that, which means I have to have a sense that it's coming, and I have to get in position, because how important is background? Remember, I told you it's everything. All of those photographs have backgrounds I like. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the book, and you'd never see them. They would be invisible and buried somewhere, in the bottom of my notes and my other stuff.
With all that involved, how are project expenses?
The expenses? Time, I don't even want to venture a guess. These are passionate kind of, love affairs to do. It's really not a money thing. But there is, I have to tell you, just in personal, going out of, somebody said something really interesting that is accurate. To do these projects well, you have to exit your life and enter theirs. It's as simple as that. And so when I was doing growing season, I would sit in front of the Migrant Center on Sundays, doing my homework, preparing for class, not even taking pictures. Why would I do that? To be seen. The more they see me, the more comfortable they are. The more I'm in their world and out of mine, the more likely they are to cooperate and maybe have ideas for me or allow me into their worlds. If I just show up, and then leave, show up and leave, how am I supposed to develop any trust and any intimacy and anything? So the amount of time, I don't even want to venture a guess. I lapped growing season's farm 300, 400, 500 times before I finally realized I had everything. How many times have I driven to Massillon? Maybe at least that many times in 5 years, probably more. And so, impossible to venture a guess as to how, but to have had this experience and then come back to your life is huge. Both of these projects. That's why the only thing left that I would still do over teaching or freelancing or all the other things I did would be to go back to doing another project, because that is such a rewarding thing personally, not financially. I'd happily do another one.
When did you get your first camera, and when did you realize this was a passion for you?
So this comes back to my dad. And so I was failing out of business at Kent State. I was one of those people who was about to not make it. Seriously. And I have dyslexia, so reading, multiple chapters, before class. The class is on Tuesday. By Thursday, I have to have 7 chapters read or some ridiculous thing. I can't do that. And so it turns out that my area, the area where I can excel, is in the arts. And so, to my father's credit, he goes, well, pick one. So I was thinking music, but I can't do that in front of people, so that's out. Writing, that possibility. And then photography. I chose photography, and to his credit, without pulling me away from, me trying to figure myself out, he went and got me set up with cameras. And I think when we had the opening at the Canton Museum of Art and we had 700 people there plus, I think he was floored. And that's how it started.
Real quick question, as far as filming, have you ever caught the buzz of the press box, the Massillon Tiger live broadcast with all the medias?
I was up there, yes. Again, all of this, it's funny because if Alex were to text me and say, hey, we're doing Tiger Legacy 2, I could actually do a whole nother book here and not repeat myself. There's so much here, and so now you're talking about this, and then there's this, and then there's this, you know, and new families and more traditions, and you know. So I was there, I photographed quite a bit of it. I just couldn't get the image itself to be strong enough to make the final cut and make it into these really very select images. Anybody else? Questions? Okay, I think we're pulling a number or a...
Yes, we are. Gary, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.